Tribunal, please, the next presentation will be the Gestapo, and it'll take just a few seconds to get the material here. We're ready to proceed. Tribunal, please, we're ready to proceed if your honors are.
Yes.
We first pass to the tribunal document book marked Exhibit AA. The honors will notice they're in 2 volumes, and I'll try at each time to refer to which volume. They're separated by the D documents, the L documents, PS documents, etc. The presentation of evidence on the criminality of the Geheime Staatspolizei, or the Gestapo, includes evidence on the criminality of the SD, of the SS, which has been discussed by Major Farr, because a great deal of the criminal acts were so interrelated. In the indictment, as your honors know, the SD is included by special reference as a part of the SS, since it originated as a part of the SS and has always retained its character as a party organization, as distinguished from the Gestapo, which was a state organization. As will be shown by the evidence, however, the Gestapo and the SD were brought into very close working relationship, the SD serving primarily as the information gathering agency and the Gestapo as the executive agency of the police system established by the Nazis for the purpose of combating the political and ideological enemies of the Nazi regime. In short, I think we might think of the SD as the intelligence organization and the Gestapo, the executive agency. The former, the party organization, and the latter, a state organization, but merged together for all practical purposes. The first subject, the Gestapo and SD, were formed into a powerful, centralized political police system that served party, state, and Nazi leadership. The Gestapo was first established in Prussia on the 26th of April 1933 by the defendant Goering, with the mission of carrying out the duties of political police with or in place of the ordinary police authorities. The Gestapo was given the rank of a higher police authority and was subordinated only to the Minister of Interior, to whom was delegated the responsibility of determining its functional and territorial jurisdiction. That fact is established in the Prussian Gesetzsammlung of 26 April 1933, page 122, and it's our document 2104 PS. Pursuant to this law, and on the same date, the Minister of the Interior issued a decree on the reorganization of the police, which established a state police bureau in each governmental district of Prussia, subordinate to the secret state police bureau in Berlin. And I cite as authority the ministerial blatt for the internal administration of Prussia, 1933, page 503, and it's document 2371 PS. Concerning the formation of the Gestapo, the defendant Goering said in Abbau einer Nation of 1934, page 87, which is our document 2344 PS, and I quote from the English translation. It's a short paragraph, Your Honor, and you take judicial notice unless Your Honors want to turn to it. Quote, "For weeks," this is Goering talking, "for weeks I had been working personally on the reorganization, and at last I alone, and upon my own decision and my own reflection, created the office of the secret state police. This instrument, which is so feared by the enemies of the state, has contributed most to the fact that today there can no longer be talk of a communist or Marxist danger in Germany and Prussia," unquote.
What was today?
The date, 1934. 1934, sir. On November the 30th, 1933, Goering issued a decree for the Prussian State Ministry and the Reich Chancellor, placing the Gestapo under his direct supervision as chief. The Gestapo was thereby established as an independent branch of the administration of the interior, responsible directly to Goering as Prussian Prime Minister. This decree gave the Gestapo jurisdiction over the political police matters of the general and interior administration, and provided that the district, county, and local police authorities were subject to the directives of the Gestapo. And that cites the Prussian laws of 30 November 1933, page 413, and document 2105 PS. In a speech delivered at a meeting of the Prussian State Council on 18 June 1934, which is published in the Speeches and Essays of Hermann Goering, 1939, page 102, and our document 3343 PS, Goering said, and I quote one paragraph, "The creation of the secret state police was also a necessity. You may recognize the importance attributed to this instrument of the state's security from the fact that the Prime Minister himself has made himself head of this department of the administration, because it is just the observation of all currents directed against the new state which is of fundamental importance," unquote. By decree of the 8th of March 1934, the regional state police offices were separated from their organizational connection with the district government and established as independent authorities of the Gestapo. That cites the Prussian law of 8 March 1934, page 143, our document 2113 PS. I now offer in evidence document number 1680 PS, U.S. Exhibit 477. This is an article entitled, quote, 10 Years, Security Police and the SD, unquote, published in the German Police Journal, the magazine of the Security Police and SD of 1 February 1943. I quote one paragraph from this article on page 2 of the English translation, document 1680, which is the third main paragraph. I quote, "Parallel to that development in Prussia, the Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler created in Bavaria the Bavarian political police, and also suggested and directed in the other federal states outside of Prussia the establishment of political police. The unification eradication of the political police of all of the federal states took place in the spring of 1934, when Hermann Goering appointed Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler, who had meanwhile been nominated as commander of the political police forces of all the federal states possible. The Prussian law about the secret state police, dated 10 February 1936, then summed up the development hitherto and determined the position and responsibilities of the secret state police in the executive regulations issued the same day, unquote. On 10 February 1936, the basic law for the Gestapo was promulgated by Goering as Prussian Prime Minister. I refer to document 2107 PS. This law provided that the secret state police had the duty to investigate and to combat in the entire territory of the state all tendencies inimical to the state, and declared that orders and matters of the secret state police were not subject to the review of the administrative courts. That's the Prussian state law of that date, cited in pages 21, 22 of the publications of the laws of 1936. Also, on that same date of 10 February 1936, a decree for the execution of the law was issued by Goering as Prussian Prime Minister and by Frick as Minister of the Interior. This decree provided that the Gestapo had authority to enact measures valid in the entire area of the state and measures affecting that area. By the way, that's found in 2108 PS. It's also a published law. That it was the centralized agency for collecting political intelligence in the field of political police, and that it administered the concentration camps. The Gestapo was given authority to make police investigations in cases of criminal attacks upon the party as well as upon the state. Later, on the 28th of August, 1936, a circular of the Reichsfuhrer SS and Chief of German Police provided that as of 1 October 1936, the political police forces of the German provinces were to be called the Geheime Staatspolizei. That means the secret state police. The regional offices were still to be described as state police. That translation of that law is in 2372 PS. And the Reichsministerial Gazette Blatt of 1936, number 44, page 1344. Later on, 20 September 1936, a circular of the Minister of Interior, Frick, commissioned the Gestapo Bureau in Berlin with the supervision of the duties of the political police commanders in all the states of Germany. That's Blatt 1936, page 1343, our document L297. The law regulating and relating to financial measures in connection with the police of the 19th of March 1937 provided that the officials of the Gestapo were to be considered direct officials of the Reich, and their salaries, in addition to the operational expenses of the whole state police, were to be borne from 1 April 1937 by the Reich. That's shown in document 2243 PS, which is a copy of the law of 19 March 1937, page 325. Thus, through the above laws and decrees, the Gestapo was established as a uniform political police system operating throughout the Reich and serving party, state, and Nazi leadership. In the course of the development of the SD, it came into increasingly close cooperation with the Gestapo, and also with the Reich Kriminalpolizei, the criminal police, are known as Kripo, K-R-I-P-O, shown up there under Amt 5. The SD was called upon to furnish information to various state authorities. On the 11th of November 1938, a decree of the Reich Minister of Interior declared the SD to be the intelligence organization for the state as well as the party, that it had the particular duty of supporting the secret state police, and that it thereby became active on a national mission. These duties necessitated a closer cooperation between the SD and the authorities for the general and interior administration. That law is translated in 1638 PS. The tribunal has already received evidence concerning the decrees of 17 and 26 June 1936, under which Himmler was appointed chief of the German police and by which Heydrich became the first chief of the security police and SD. Even then, Goering did not relinquish his position as chief of the Prussian Gestapo. Thus, the decree of the Reichsführer SS and chief of German police that is issued on the 28th of August 1936, which is our document 2372 PS, was distributed, quote, to the Prussian Ministry President as chief of the Prussian Secret State Police, unquote, being Mr. Goering. On 27 September 1939, by order of Himmler, in his capacity as Reichsführer SS and chief of the German police, the central offices of the Gestapo and SD, and also together with the criminal police, were centralized in the office of the chief of security police and SD under the name of RSHA, which your honors have heard described by Major Farr. Under this order, the personnel and administrative sections of each agency were coordinated in Amt 1 and 2 of the chart shown here of the RSHA. The operational sections of the SD became Amt 3, shown in the box Amt 3, except for foreign intelligence, which was placed over in number 6. The operational sections of the Gestapo became Amt 4, as shown on the chart, and the operational sections of the Kripo, that's the criminal police, became Amt 5, as shown on the chart. Ohlendorf was named the chief of Amt 3, the SD inside Germany, and Muller was named chief of Amt 4, and Niebe was named chief of Amt 5, the Kripo. On the 27th of September 1939, Heydrich, a chief of the security police and SD, issued a directive pursuant to the order of Himmler, in which he ordered that the designation and heading of RSHA to be used exclusively in internal relations of the Reich Ministry of the Interior, and the heading, quote, the chief of the security police and SD, unquote, in transactions with outside persons and offices. The directive providing that the Gestapo would continue to use the designation and heading Secret State Police according to the particular instruction. This order, which is document L361, U.S. Exhibit 478, which we now offer in evidence and refer your honors to the first paragraph, L-361. That's found in the first volume. L-361. Just direct your honors' attention to the date and to the subject, which is the amalgamation of the Central Amter, of the Sicherheitspolizei, and of the SD, and creating the four sections. Then the words will be joined to the RSHA in accordance with the following directives. This amalgamation carries with it no change in the position of the Amter in the party, nor in their local administration, unquote. I might say here parenthetically, if the tribunal please, that we like to think of the RSHA as being the so-called administrative office through which a great many of these organizations were administered, and then a number of these organizations, including the Gestapo, maintain their separate identity as an operational organization. I think a good illustration, your honors, please recall during the war that maybe a certain division or a certain air force would be administratively under a certain headquarters, and maybe operationally, when they had an invasion, it would be under a general supervision of somebody else who was operating a task force. So the RSHA was really the administrative office of a great many of these alleged criminal organizations. Now then, the Gestapo and SD were organized functionally on the basis of the opponents to be combated and the matters to be investigated. I now invite the attention of the tribunal to this chart, which has already been identified, and I believe it's exhibit number 53. This chart, I'm in error, that's the original identification number. This chart shows the main chain of command from Himmler, who was the Reich leader of the SS and chief of the German police, to Kaltenbrunner, who was chief of the security police and SD, and from Kaltenbrunner to the various field offices of the Gestapo and the SD. We now formally offer in evidence this chart as document L219. The chart itself is based upon the document which is L29, and ask that the charts be passed to the... Unless your honors desire, we have photostatic copies. You probably want to refer to the one on the wall. This chart, from which the one on the wall is taken, has been certified by Otto Ohlendorf, Chief of Amt 3 of the RSHA, and by Walter Schellenberg, Chief of Amt 6 of the RSHA, been officially identified by both of those former officials. The chart shows that the principal flow of command in police matters came from Himmler as Reich leader of the SS and chief of the German police directly to Kaltenbrunner, who was the chief of the security police and SD, and as such he was also head of the RSHA, which is the administrative office to which I have referred. Kaltenbrunner's headquarters organization was composed of 7 Amter plus a military office, the 7 Amter shown here. Under subsection D was Obersturmbannführer Roth, who handled technical matters, including motor vehicles of the SEPO and the SD, to which we will refer later. Amt 3 was the SD inside Germany and was charged with investigations into spheres of German national life. It was the internal intelligence organization of the police system, and its interest extended into all areas occupied by Germany during the course of the war. In 1943, it contained 4 sections. I'd like to mention them briefly, which shows their scope of authorities. Section A dealt with questions of legal order and structure of the Reich. B dealt with national questions including minorities, race, and health of the people. C dealt with culture, including science, education, religion, press, folk culture, and art. And D with economics, including food, commerce, industry, labor, colonial economics, and occupied regions. Now, Amt 4, with which we are dealing here, was the Gestapo and was charged with combating opposition. In 1945, as identified by these 2 former officials, it contained 6 subsections. 1 dealt with opponents, sabotage, and protective service, including communism, Marxism, reaction, and liberalism. B dealt with political, churches, sects, and Jews, including political Catholicism, political Protestantism, other churches, Freemasonry, and a special section of B4 that had to do with Jewish affairs, matters of evacuation, means of suppressing enemies of the people and state, and dispossession of rights of German citizenship. The head of the office was Eichmann. Under C, it dealt with protective custody. D, with regions under German domination. E, with security. And F, with passport matters and alien police. Now, Amt 5, which will be referred to as the Kripo, was charged with combating crime. For example, subsection D was the Criminological Institute for the SEPO and handled matters of identification, chemical and biological investigations, and technical research. Number 6 was the SD outside of Germany and concerned primarily with foreign political intelligence. In 1944, the Abwehr, our military intelligence, was joined with Amt 6 as military Amt. The honors will recall that the witness Lehausen was in the Abwehr. Amt 6 maintained its own regional organization. And finally, Amt 7 handled ideological research among enemies such as Freemasonry, Judaism, political churches, Marxism, and liberalism. Within Germany, there were regional offices of the SD, the Gestapo, and the Kripo, shown on the chart up at the right. The Gestapo and Kripo offices were often located in the same place and were always collectively referred to as the SEPO. You see that shady line around refers to the collective operation of the Gestapo and Kripo. Gestapo, the secret police, and Kripo, the criminal police. These regional offices all maintain their separate identity and reported directly to the section of the RSHA, that's on the Kaltenbrunner, which had the jurisdiction of the subject matter. They were, however, coordinated by inspectors of the security police and SD, as shown at the top of the chart. The inspectors were also under the supervision of higher SS and police leaders appointed for each Wegkreis. The higher SS and police leaders reported to Himmler and supervised not only the inspectors of the security police and SD, but also the inspectors of the order police and various subdivisions. In the occupied territories, the organization developed as the German armies advanced. Combined operational units of the security police and the SD, known as Einsatz groups, about which your honors will hear in a few minutes, operated with and in the rear of the army. These groups were officered by personnel of the Gestapo and the Kripo and the SD, and the enlisted men were composed of order police and Waffen SS. They functioned with various army groups. The Einsatz groups, and if your honors will recall, they're simply task force groups or special projects, were divided into Einsatz commandos, Sonderkommandos, and Teilkommandos, all of which perform the functions of security police and the SD with or closely behind the army. After the occupied territories had been consolidated, these Einsatz groups and their subordinate parts were formed into permanent combined offices of the security police and SD within the particular geographical location. These combined forces were placed under commandeurs of the security police and SD, and the offices were organized in a section similar to this RSHA headquarters. The commanders of the security police and SD reported directly to Befehlshabers of the security police and SD, who in turn reported directly to the chief of security police and SD. In the occupied countries, the higher SS and police leaders were more directly controlled by the Befehlshabers and the commanders of the security police and SD than within the Reich. They had authority to issue direct orders so long as they did not conflict with the chief of the security police and SD, who exercised controlling authority. The above chart and the remarks concerning it are based upon two documents which I now offer in evidence. They are documents L219, which is the organization plan of the RSHA of 1 October 1943, and document 2346 PS. Now next, the primary mission of the Gestapo and the SD was to combat the actual and ideological enemies of the Nazi regime and to keep Hitler and the Nazi leadership in power as specified in count 1 of the indictment. The tasks and methods of the secret state police were well described in an article which is translated in document 1956 PS 1956, volume 2 of the document book. which is an article published in January 1936 in Das Archiv at page 1342, which I now offer in evidence and quote from it. It's on page 1 of the English translation, 1956. I first read the first paragraph and then the third and fourth paragraphs. This is in January 1936, quoting, "In order to refute the malicious rumors spread abroad, the Völkische Beobachter of 22nd January 1936 published an article on the origin, meaning, and task of the secret state police. Extracts from this read as follows," and then skip to the third paragraph. "The secret state police is an official machinery on the lines of the criminal police, whose special task is the prosecution of crimes and offenses against the state. Above all, the prosecution of high treason and treason. The task of the secret state police is to detect these crimes and offenses, to ascertain the perpetrators, and to bring them to judicial punishment. The number of criminal proceedings continually pending in the People's Court on account of high treasonable actions and of treason is the result of this work. The next most important field of operations for the secret state police is the preventive combating of all dangers threatening the state and the leadership of the state. As since the National Socialist Revolution, all open struggle and all open opposition to the state and to the leadership of the state is forbidden. A secret state police as a preventive instrument in the struggle against all dangers threatening the state is indissolubly bound up with the National Socialist leader state. The opponents of National Socialism were not removed by the prohibition of their organizations and their newspapers, but have withdrawn to other forms of struggle against the state. Therefore, the National Socialist state has a trace out to watch over and to render harmless the underground opponents fighting against it in illegal organizations, in camouflaged associations, in the coalitions of well-meaning fellow Germans, and even in the organizations of party and state, before they have succeeded in actually executing an action direct against the interest of the state. This task of fighting with all means the secret enemies of the state will be spared no leader state, because powers hostile to the state from their foreign headquarters always make use of some persons in such a state and employ them in underground activity against the state. The preventive activity of the secret state police consists primarily in the thorough observation of all enemies of the state in the Reich territory. A secret state police cannot carry out, in addition to its primary executive task, this observation of the enemies of the state to the extent necessary. There steps alongside to supplement it the security service of the Reich leader of the SS, set up by the Deputy Führer as the political intelligence service of the movement, which puts a large part of the forces of the movement mobilized by it into the service of the security of the state. The secret state police takes the necessary police preventive measures against the enemies of the state on the basis of the results of the observation. The most effective preventive measure is without doubt the withdrawal of freedom, which
which is covered in the form of protective custody, if it is to be feared that the free activity of the persons in question might endanger the security of the state in any way. The employment of protective custody is so organized by directions of the Reich and Prussian Minister of Interior and by a special arrest procedure of the secret state police that as far as preventative fight against the enemies of the state permits, copious guarantees against the misuse of protective custody are also provided.
I'm sorry, haven't we really got enough now as to the organization of the Gestapo and its
I'll
objects?
omit the reading of the rest of this paragraph.
Well, I'm not sure that will satisfy me.
Yes.
Well, I was asking, haven't we got enough about the organization of the Gestapo now?
Your Honor, I was through with the organization. I was just going into the question of this action of protective custody with which the Gestapo was famed and showing how they went into that field of activity and the authority for taking people into alleged protective custody.
I think that's been proved more than once in the preceding evidence that we've heard.
There's one more I'd like to refer to, that is, it's not subject to judicial review, unless that's been established. I don't know whether Major Farr did that or not.
But that they're not subject to judicial process.
To judicial review.
Review, yes.
Yes.
I think you've said that already this afternoon.
Well, the citation is in the Reichs Gesetzblatt of 1935, page 577, which is document 2347 PS. I would like, if Your Honor is pleased, to refer to this quotation from that same law. The decision of the Prussian High Court of Administration on the 2nd of May 1935 held that the status of the Gestapo as a special police authority removed its orders from the jurisdiction of the administrative tribunal. And the court said in that law that the only redress available was by appeal to the next higher authority within the Gestapo itself.
I think you told us that, apropos of the document of the 10th of February 1936, where you said that it was not subject to the secret state police was not subject to review by any of the state courts.
I just didn't want there to be any question about the authority. May I cite one? I refer the honors to document 1852B-PS, which is already in evidence as 449, also stating that theory. And also document 1723 PS. And that is a decree, Your Honor, of February 1st, 1938, which relates to the protective custody and the issuance of new regulations. And I'd like to quote just one sentence from that law. As a coercive measure of the secret state police against persons who endangered the security of the people and the state through their attitude in order to counter all aspirations of the enemies of the people of the state, and that the Gestapo had the exclusive right to order protective custody, and that protective custody was to be executed in the state concentration camps. Now I pass to another phase where the SD created an organization of agents and informants who operated through the various regional offices throughout the Reich, and later in conjunction with the Gestapo and the criminal police throughout the occupied countries. The SD operated secretly. One of the things it did was to secretly mark ballots in order to discover the identity of persons who cast no votes in the referendum. I now offer in evidence document R142. Second volume, I believe it's towards the end of the document book. R142, U.S. Exhibit 481. This document contains a letter from the branch office of the SD at Cochin to the SD at Koblenz. The letter is dated the 7th of May, 1938, and refers to the plebiscite of 10 April, 1938. It refers to a letter previously received from the Koblenz office and apparently is a reply to a request for information concerning the way in which people voted in the supposedly secret plebiscite. It's on page 1 of document R-142.
Colonel Storey, I'm told that that's been read before.
Well, I didn't know it had, if Your Honor, please. We just offered it without reading then. With reference to National Socialism and the contribution of the SEPO and the SD, I refer to an article of 7 September 1942, which is shown in PS 3344. PS 3344. It's the first paragraph. Volume 2. The official journal, quoting, Already before the taking over of power, the SD has added its part to the success of the National Socialist Revolution. After the taking over of power, the security police and the SD have borne the responsibility for the inner security of the Reich and have paved the way for a powerful fulfillment of National Socialism against all resistance. In connection with the criminal responsibility of the SD and Gestapo, it will be considered with respect to certain war crimes and crimes against humanity, which were in the principal part committed by the centralized political police system. The development, organization, and tasks have been considered before. In some instances, the crimes were committed in cooperation or in conjunction with other groups or organizations. Now, in order to look into the strength of these various organizations, I have some figures here that I'd like to quote to Your Honors. The SEPO and SD, as I've referred to, were composed of the Gestapo, the Kripo, and the SD. The Gestapo was the largest, and it had a membership of about 40 to 50,000 in 1934 to 1935. That's an error. That's 43 to 45. It was the political force of the Reich.
What you say? The date was wrong?
Yes, sir, the date was wrong. It's 43 to 45, Your Honor, please. 40 to 50,000.
Very well.
Where are these figures from? It's document 3033. PS, and it's an affidavit of Walter Schellenberg, one of the former officials, as I referred to a moment ago. I believe, if Your Honor please, to get it in the record, I'll read that whole affidavit. It's document 3033 PS. I have the English translation here. The SEPO and SD was composed of the Gestapo, Kripo, and SD. In 1943 to 1945, the Gestapo had a membership of about 40 to 50,000. The Kripo had a membership of about 15,000, and the SD had a membership of about 3,000. In common usage, and even in orders and decrees, the term SD was used as an abbreviation for the term SEPO and SD. In most cases, actual executive action was carried out by personnel of the Gestapo rather than of the SD or the Kripo. In occupied territories, members of the Gestapo frequently wore SS uniforms with SD insignia. New members of the Gestapo and the SD were taken on a voluntary basis and then subscribed and sworn to on the 21st of November 1945 before Lieutenant Harris. I think I ought to say here, if Your Honors please, that it is our information that a great many of the members of the Gestapo were also members of the SS. We've heard various estimates of the amount, but have no direct authority. Some say, or some authorities say, as much as 75%. But still, we have no direct evidence on that. I now offer in evidence document 2751 PS, which is U.S. Exhibit 482, which is an affidavit of Alfred Nojos. 2751 PS, dated November 20th, 1945. This affidavit particularly refers to the actual occurrences in connection with the Polish border incident. I believe was referred to by the witness Leyhausen when he was on the stand. 2751. I, Alfred Helmut Nojos, being first duly sworn, depose and state as follows. I was a member of the SS from 1931 to the 19th of October 1944, and a member of the SD from its creation in 1934 to January 1941. I served as a member of the Waffen SS from February 1941 until the middle of 1942. Thereafter, I served in the economic department of the military administration of Belgium from September 1942 to September 1944. I surrendered to the Allies on 19 October 1944. On or about 10 August 1939, the chief of the SIPO and SD Heydrich personally ordered me to simulate an attack on the radio station near Gleiwitz, near the Polish border, and to make it appear that the attacking force consisted of Poles. Heydrich said, practical proof is needed for these attacks of the Poles for the foreign press, as well as for German propaganda purposes. I was directed to go to Gleiwitz with 5 or 6 other SD men and wait there until I received a code word from Heydrich indicating that the attack should take place. My instructions were to seize the radio station and to hold it long enough to permit a Polish-speaking German who would be put at my disposal to broadcast a speech in Polish. Heydrich told me that this speech should state that the time had come for the conflict between the Germans and the Poles, and that the Poles should get together and smash down any Germans from whom they met resistance. Heydrich also told me at this time that he expected an attack on Poland by Germany in a few days. I went to Gleiwitz and waited there 14 days. Then I requested permission of Heydrich to return to Berlin, but was told to stay in Gleiwitz. Between the 25th and 31st of August, I went to see Heinrich Müller, head of the Gestapo, who was then nearby at Oppeln. In my presence, Müller discussed with a man named Melhorn plans for another border incident, in which it should be made to appear that Polish soldiers were attacking German troops. Germans in the approximate strength of a company were to be used. Müller stated that he had 12 or 13 condemned criminals who were to be dressed in Polish uniforms and left dead on the ground of the scene of the incident to show that they had been killed while attacking. For this purpose, they were to be given fatal injections by a doctor employed by Heydrich. Then they were also to be given gunshot wounds. After the incident, members of the press and other persons were to be taken to the spot of the incident. A police report was subsequently to be prepared. Muller told me that he had an order from Heydrich to make one of those criminals available to me for the action at Glowitz. The code name by which he referred to these criminals was canned goods. The incidents at Glowitz in which I participated was carried out on the evening preceding the German attack on Poland. As I recall, war broke out on the 1st of September, 1939. At noon on the 31st of August, I received by telephone from Heydrich the code word for the attack which was to take place at 8 o'clock that evening. Heydrich said, in order to carry out this attack, report to Muller for canned goods. I did this and gave Muller instructions to deliver the man near the radio station. I received this man and had him laid down at the entrance to the station. He was alive, but he was completely unconscious. I tried to open his eyes. I could not recognize by his eyes that he was alive, only by his breathing. I did not see the shot wounds, but a lot of blood was smeared across his face. He was in civilian clothes. We seized the radio station as ordered, broadcast a speech of 3 to 4 minutes over an emergency transmitter, fired some pistol shots, and left. And then sworn to and subscribed by Nojoks before Lieutenant Martin. The Gestapo and the SD carried out mass murders of hundreds of thousands of civilians of occupied countries as a part of the Nazi program to exterminate political and racial undesirables by the so-called Einsatz groups. The honors will recall evidence concerning the activities of these Einsatz groups or Einsatz commandos. I now refer to document R102. Your Honor, please, I understand Major Parr introduced this document this morning, but I want to refer to just one brief statement which he did not include concerning the SD and the Einsatz groups and security police. It's on page 4 of R102. Quoting, during the period covered by this report, the stations of the Einsatz groups of the security police and SD have changed only in the northern sector. Unquote.
What was the document?
R102, which is already introduced in evidence by Major Parr, and it's in volume 2 towards the end of the book. R102.
I've got the document, yes. Page 4, is it?
Page 4, yes. There are two reports submitted by the chief of Einsatz Group A available. The first report is document L180, which has already been received as U.S. Exhibit 27.
Would you not pass quite so quickly from one document to the other?
Yes, sir, pardon me. 180, and I want to quote from page 13. It's on page 6 of the page 5 of the English translation. It's the beginning of the first paragraph near the bottom of the page. Quoting, in view of the extension of the area of operations and of the great number of duties which had to be performed by the security police, it was intended from the very beginning to obtain the cooperation of the reliable population for the fight against vermin, that is, mainly the Jews and communists, unquote. And also in the same document, page 30 of the original, page 8 of the English translation. Quoting, from the beginning, page 8 of the English translation. From the beginning, it was to be expected that the Jewish problem could not be solved by pogroms alone.
I'm told this has been read.
Sir?
I'm told this has been read already.
Well, I had it checked and we didn't get that, Your Honor. I'll pass it then. Now, if Your Honor please, we'll pass the document 2273 PS next. I offer in evidence now just portions of document 2273 PS, which is U.S. Exhibit 2273 PS, 487 U.S. Exhibit. This document was captured by the USSR and will be offered in detail by our Soviet colleagues later. But with their consent, I want to introduce in evidence a chart which is identified by that document. And we have an enlargement we'd like to put on the board and pass to the tribunal photostatic copies. Please, this chart, it's identified by the photostatic copy attached to the original report, which will be dealt with in detail later. I want to quote just one statement from page 2 of the English translation of that document. It's the third paragraph from the bottom on page 2, the English translation. The Estonian self-protection movement, formed as the Germans advanced, did begin to arrest Jews, but there were no spontaneous pogroms. Only by the security police and the SD were the Jews gradually executed as they became no longer required for work. Today, there are no longer any Jews in Estonia. That document is a top secret document by Einsatzgruppe Group A, which was a special projects group. This chart, of which the photostatic copy is attached to the original, in the German translation on the wall, shows the progress of the extermination of the Jews in the area in which this Einsatz commando group operated. The Honor will refer to the top next to Petersburg, or Leningrad as we know it, and down below you'll see the picture of a coffin, and that is described in the report as 3,600 having been killed. Next, over at the left, is another coffin in one of the small Baltic states, showing 963 in that area have been put in the coffin. And then next down near the capital of Riga, you will notice that they got 35,238 that were put away in the coffins. And it refers to the ghetto there as still having 2,500. Come down to the next square, or the next state,
showing 136,421 were put in their coffins. And then in the next area near Mentz, and just above Mentz, there were 41,828 put in their coffins.
Are you sure that they were put in the coffin in the one of 136,000?
I beg your pardon, sir?
Are you sure that they were executed, the ones 136,000? Because there is no coffin there, and there are...
No, sir, the bottom statement.
No, he's got it on there.
Here are the totals from the document.
Are these photostatic copies are different to what you've got there? Where in the area which is marked 136,421, there is no coffin.
Well, I'm sorry. The one that I have is a true and correct copy up there.
Myson got it, and Mr. Biddleston got it.
Will you pass this, please, Honor?
I suppose the document itself will show whether...
I'll turn to the original and verify. Let me have the original exhibit. Apparently there's a typographical error, but let me have the original document. The translator has it.
I see that page 4.
Your Honor, please, here it is, the photostat. It's 136,421 with the coffin.
Yes, well, as Judge Parker points out, it's in the document itself, too.
Yes, that's in the document itself. There's an error on that. The 128,000 at the bottom shows at that time there were 128,000 on hand. And the literal translation of the statement, as I understand, means still on hand in the Mentz area. I next refer to document 1104 PS. Volume 2, U.S. Exhibit 483, which I now offer in evidence.
Colonel Storey, did you tell us what the document was? There's nothing on the translation. Does that show what the document is?
Your Honor, please, it is a report of the Special Purpose Group A top secret report, or the Einsatz group. In other words, making a report of their activities in these areas, and this chart was attached showing the areas covered.
A special group of the Gestapo.
The special group that is organized of the Gestapo and the SD in that area. In other words, a commando group. As I mentioned, Your Honor, they organize these special commando groups to work in and behind the armies as they consolidated their gains in occupied territories. And Your Honor will hear from other reports of these Einsatz groups as we go along in this presentation. In other words, Einsätze means special action or action groups, and they were organized to cover certain geographical areas behind the immediate front line.
Yes, but they were groups, were they, of the Gestapo?
The Gestapo and SD.
Well, that's part of the Gestapo.
And there were Kripo in it. There were some of the Kripo in it, too. Now, the next document of 1104 PS, dated October 30, 1941, this document shows on that date the Commissioner of the Territory of Slutsk wrote a report to the Commissioner General of Minsk, in which he severely criticized the action of the Einsatz commandos of the SIPO and the SD operating in his area for the murder of Jewish population of that area. And I quote from the English translation on page 4 of that document.
1104, page 4.
Beginning at the first paragraph after the colon. On 27 October, in the morning at about 8 o'clock, a first lieutenant of the police battalion number 11 from Lithuania appeared and introduced himself as the adjutant of the battalion commander of the security police. The first lieutenant explained that the police battalion had received the assignment to effect the liquidation of all Jews here in the town of Slutsk within 2 days. The battalion commander, his battalion in strength of 4 companies, 2 of which were made up of Lithuanian partisans, was on the march here, and the action would have to begin instantly. I replied to the first lieutenant that I had to discuss the action in any case first with the commander. About half an hour later, the police battalion arrived in Slutsk. Immediately after the arrival, the conference with the battalion commander took place according to my request. I first explained to the commander that it would not very well be possible to effect the action without previous preparation, because everybody had been sent to work, and that it would lead to a terrible confusion. At least it would have been his duty to inform me a day ahead of time. Then I requested him to postpone the action 1 day. However, he rejected this with the remark that he had to carry out this action everywhere and in all towns, and that only 2 days were allotted for Slutsk. Within those 2 days, the town of Slutsk had to be cleared of Jews by all means. Unquote. That report was made to the Reich Commissioner for the Eastern Territories through Gauleiter Heinrich Loesch at Riga. The honors will recall that he was referred to in other presentations. Now, skipping over to page 5, the first paragraph, I'd like to quote it, quoting, "For the rest, as regards the execution of the action, I must point out to my deepest regret that the later bordered already on sadism. The town itself offered a picture of horror during the action, with indescribable brutality on the part of both the German police officers and particularly the Lithuanian partisans, the Jewish people, but also among them white Ruthenians, were taken out of their dwellings and herded together. Everywhere in the town, shots were to be heard, and in different streets, the corpses of shot Jews accumulated. The white Ruthenians were in greatest distress to free themselves from the encirclement, regardless of the fact that the Jewish people, among whom were also tradesmen, were mistreated in a terribly barbarous way in the face of the white Ruthenian people. The white Ruthenians themselves were also worked over with rubber clubs and rifle butts. There was no question of an action against the Jews anymore. It rather looked like a revolution, unquote. And then I skip down to the next to the last paragraph on that same page. Quoting, "In conclusion, I find myself obliged to point out that the police battalion has looted in an unheard of manner during the action, and that not only in Jewish houses, but just the same in those of the white Ruthenians. Anything of use, such as boots, leather, cloth, gold, and other valuables, has been taken away. On the basis of statements of members of the armed forces, watches were torn off of the arms of the Jews in public, on the street. Rings were pulled off the fingers in the most brutal manner. A majority of the finance department reported, a major of the finance department reported, that a Jewish girl was asked by the police to obtain immediately 5,000 rubles to have her father released. This girl is said to have actually gone everywhere in order to obtain the money," unquote. There's another paragraph with reference to the number of copies being and that's on the third page of the translation that I'd like to call Your Honor's attention to. The last paragraph on page 3 of the translation. 40. I am submitting, page 3 of the English translation, last paragraph. Quoting, "I am submitting this report in duplicate so that one copy may be forwarded to the Reich Minister. Peace and order cannot be maintained in White Ruthenia with methods of that sort. To bury seriously wounded people alive who work their way out of their graves again is such a base and filthy act that this incident as such should be reported to the Fuhrer and the Reich Marshal. The civil administration of White Ruthenia makes very strenuous efforts to win the population over to Germany in accordance with the instructions of the Fuhrer. These efforts cannot be brought in harmony with the methods described herein." Signed by the Commissioner General for White Ruthenia. And then on the 11th of November 1941, forwards it on to the Reich Minister for Occupied Countries in Berlin.
Who was that at that time?
The Reich Minister, I believe at that time for Eastern Occupied Countries, was the defendant Rosenberg. I think that's correct. On the same date, by a separate letter, the Commissioner General of White Ruthenia reported to the Reich Commissioner for the Eastern countries that he had received money, valuables, and other objects taken by the police in the action at Slutz and other regions, all of which had been deposited with the Reich Credit Institute for the disposal of the Reich Commissioner. On 21 November 1941, a report on the Slutz incident was sent to the personal reviewer of the permanent deputy of the Minister of the Reich, with a copy to Heydrich, who was the chief of the security police and the SD. That's shown on the first page of document 1104. The activities of the Einsatz group continued throughout 1943 and 1944 under Kaltenbrunner as chief of the security police and SD. Under adverse war conditions, however, the program of extermination was to a large extent changed to one of rounding up slave labor for Germany. I next refer to document 3012 PS, which has heretofore been introduced as Exhibit 190. This is a letter from the headquarters of one of the commando group, the section known as Einsatz Group C, dated 19th of March, 1943. This letter summarizes the real activities and methods of the Gestapo and SD, and I should like to refer to additional portions to those previously quoted. On page 2 of document 3012, I believe I'll read the first page, beginning with the first paragraph. It is the task of the security police and of the security service, SD, to discover all enemies of the Reich and fight against them in the interest of security, and in the zone of operations, especially to guarantee the security of the army. Besides the annihilation of active opponents, all other elements who, by virtue of their opinions or their past, may appear active as enemies under favorable conditions are to be eliminated through preventive measures. The security police carries out this task according to the general directives of the Fuhrer, with all of the required toughness. Energetic measures are especially necessary in territories endangered by the activity of hostile gangs. The competence of the security police within the zone of operations is based on the Barbarossa decrees. The tribunal will recall the famous Barbarossa code-named decrees that were issued in connection with the invasion of Russia. I deem the measures of the security police carried out on a considerable scale during recent times necessary for the two following reasons. One, the situation at the front in my sector had become so serious that the population, partly influenced by Hungarians and Italians, who streamed back in chaotic condition, took open position against us. Two, the strong expeditions of hostile gangs who came especially from the forest of Bryansk were another reason. Besides that, other revolutionary groups formed by the population appeared suddenly in all districts. The providing of arms evidently provided no difficulties at all. It would have been irresponsible if we had observed this whole activity without acting against it. It is obvious that all such measures bring about some harshness. I want to take up the significant points of the harsh measures. One, the shooting of Hungarian Jews. Two, the shooting of agronomes. Three, the shooting of children. Four, the total burning down of villages. Five, the shooting, quoting, while trying to escape, of security service SD prisoners. Chief of Einsatz Group C confirmed once more the correctness of the measures taken and expressed his recognition for the energetic actions. With regard to the current political situation, especially in the armament industry in the fatherland, the measures of the security police have to be subordinated to the greatest extent to the recruiting of labor for Germany. In the shortest possible time, the Ukraine has to put at the disposal of the armament industry 1 million workers, 500 of whom have to be sent from the territory daily. Your Honor, please, I believe the numbers have been quoted before by Mr. Dodd. I'll refer on the next page to the first order on 1 and 2 subparagraphs. 1, special treatment is to be limited to a minimum. 2, the listing of communist functionaries, activists, and so on is to take place by roster only for the time being without arresting anybody. It is, for instance, no longer feasible to arrest all the close relatives of a member of the Communist Party, although members of the Comsols are to be arrested only if they were active in a leading position. The next paragraph has been read in evidence 3 and 4 in the previous presentation. Number 5, the reporting of hostile gangs as well as drives against them is not affected hereby. All drives against those hostile gangs can only take place after my approval has been obtained. The prisons have to be kept empty as a rule. We have to be aware of the fact that the Slavs all interpret all soft treatment on our part as weakness, and that they will act accordingly right away. If we limit our harsh measures of security police through the above orders for the time being, that is only done for the following reason. The most important thing is the recruiting of workers. No check of persons to be sent into the Reich will be made. No written certificates of political reliability check or similar things will be issued. Signed by the SS Major Christensen and the commanding officer. I understood that Your Honors wanted to adjourn at 4 o'clock. I believe we can introduce one more. And it was the Einsatz groups of the security police and SD that operated the infamous death vans. Previously, document 501 PS, which was received as USA Exhibit 288, referred to this operation. The letter from Becker, which is a part of this exhibit, was addressed to Obersturmbannführer Roth at Berlin. We now refer to document L185. I simply referred to 501 as a reference to the death van. Document L185, U.S. Exhibit 484, is the one I now offer in evidence. Page 7 of the English translation. L185. It will be observed that the chief of Amt 2D of the RSHA in charge of technical matters was Obersturmbannführer Roth. Mr. Harris advises me that the only point to be proved by that is that Amt 2 of the RSHA, who made this report on technical matters, was the Obersturmbannführer Roth. And then he refers in the same connection to document 2348 PS, which is Exhibit 485. The previous one was to identify Roth and then to offer his affidavit, which is 2348 PS. second volume. Reading from the beginning of the affidavit, it was made on the 19th of October, 1945 in Ancona, Italy. Quoting, I hereby acknowledge the attached letter written by Dr. Becker on the 16th of May, 1942, and received by me on the 29th of May, 1942, as a genuine letter. I did on the 18th of October, 1945, write on the side of this letter a statement to the effect that it was genuine.
Not quite so fast.
I do not know the number of death vans being operated and cannot give an approximate figure. The vans were built by the Saurer, Sawyer Works, Germany, located, I believe, in Berlin. Some other firms built these vans also. Insofar as I am aware, these vans operated only in Russia. Insofar as I can state, these vans were probably operating in 1941, and I personally feel that they were operating up to the termination of the war, unquote. Your Honor, please, I don't believe that we'll have time to go into the next exhibit.
Very well. Then the tribunal will now adjourn until Wednesday, the 2nd of January.